All right, thanks everyone for coming. For those who don't know me, I'm David Sullivan. I'm the Pro Audio Account Manager for Australis Music, and TOA is one of the brands we do, and a very important one, and one we love. So what I'm going to talk about today is just a pretty informal overview of what things you have to consider about when you're designing a multi-zone system for cafes, restaurants, clubs, RSLs, that type of thing, schools. Just points to talk to the customers on, things to be aware of, and then just quickly over some of the products that address that need. So I'll start off with a quick TOA introduction. TOA is coming up to 88 years old now. Started with microphones and amps, and then went into horns and speakers, and then came up with the world's first powered megaphone in 1954. And they're the only PA manufacturer that has its own factories and its R&D. They do everything in-house. So you see here they've got plants all over the place. Indonesia does horns. Japan sort of does the more high-end stuff. Taiwan, Vietnam and China. So that's where they're at. So the product range of TOA generally is split into three areas: public address, professional audio, and security and communications. The first two is where we do most of the stuff in Australia. So 100 volt line, background music, paging, that type of thing. And the professional audio, so I spend half of my time in PA, public address, and another half in PA, professional audio. Gets confusing. More complex systems and process sound and sound filters and so forth, and mini line arrays and stuff for churches and that type of thing. And then security and communications, mainly intercoms, and some paging applications for hospitals and more specialized type things as well. So the categories, we've got mixer amps, which is basically anything with a knob on the front. It controls volume and blah blah blah. We call a mixer amp. Power amplifiers, which are more straightforward, input output. Zone paging, matrix mixers, the more advanced mixers we have, and I'll go into that. And then portable PA, little mini car amplifiers and so forth. And then ceiling speakers and horn speakers and box speakers, and wired and wireless mics. So that's pretty much covers the range. Certainly the range we do in Australia anyway. So the main ones I'll be talking about today, the three main mixer series we have: the A2000, the A3500 and the A3600. The A2000 is a single zone with 5 inputs. The A3500 series is 5 inputs with 2 zones, some muting and high and low impedance, which is handy. Most of the TOA amps are either, so these are the first ones they've had that the most recent ones they've had that can be both high or low impedance, which is handy. And the A3600 series, very similar to the A3500, but it has network control as well, and a few other little extra features for interfacing. Power amps, we'll talk about the P series and DA series, and then the more advanced matrix mixers and multi-zone paging amps. I'll take you through what they can do and how they do it. So, things to consider when you're designing. It's 2 main things. I think 3 main things: the inputs, the outputs, and the environment. So with the inputs, you got to think, what's the main use of the system? Are they just wanting background music, or are they just wanting paging? Are they wanting doof? Does it have to, if it's a cafe that's got a decent area, do they want to be able to have bands in on a Friday and Saturday night? I've seen a lot of installations where people just put in a standard system, and the guy rings up the installer a week later, and it's like, I've got a duo here, can I plug them into the system? And it's like, if it's all ceiling speakers, it's a big no-no. It's going to blow up the speakers. So you really got to find out exactly what the customer expects, and that's often the hardest part. The customer says, I just want this PA system, and then come back a week later and they say, but I want a page there, and I want a page there, and then I want a band. So establishing that before you buy any gear and start doing installing is hugely important. Types and amount of inputs, any restaurant or cafe or even school, basically any multi-zone application, they'll want inputs from, paging, background music, Bluetooth, alarm, fire, all that kind of stuff. So you really need to dig into that and find out, or else you get yourself in trouble. Again, do you require multiple zones or single zones? That's a big question. One that often people forget about, or sometimes customers come back is they want to be able to page from their telephone, especially if they've got a VoIP system. They want to be able to dial an extension and have it come through the speakers instead of using a microphone for whatever reason. Can be done, but only on certain devices. Do you require different sources in different zones? This is a good one for things like RSLs, where they've got a sports bar, they've got a restaurant, they want one kind of background music in the restaurant, the sports bar will want the Foxtel feed for whatever thing is. And then you go, okay, do you want to strip that Foxtel, do you want to strip it off the HDMI feed to the TVs, or do you want it to come straight from the box? Do you need another device to do that? It starts getting a bit more complicated when you're doing multiple zones like that. And then the other question is, okay, how do they want to control it in each zone? Do they want central control? Do they want iPad, or do they want a wall socket where someone can, a wall panel where they can adjust the volume and choose the input? So it's a good one to get into and make sure you got right. Priority levels. You guys understand what priority levels are in amps? Yeah, some do, some don't. So priority levels really just mean you've got a background music playing, and then when someone pages, that's got to turn off the background music, or at least duck it, so you can hear the speech properly. The next level of priority is if you have a fire evacuation system or an alarm, that's got to override. So the actual rules or the standards say that when a fire alarm is set off, the amp should be able to go to full volume with no other speech unless there's a pre-recorded message to get out. I just prepared that one earlier, so is it? No? Okay, cool, we're right.
Thumbs up, though.
You're the biggest loser, get out. It's really important with evac systems to get it right, because that can really come back and bite people. Especially if, God forbid, something happens to someone and there's a fire, and if the system doesn't work, that's where things get really, really tricky. And ambient noise compensation. So ambient noise compensation is hooking a mic up to the amp. The mic listens to the ambient noise level and adjusts the level of the amp proportionally. So we use this a lot in shopping malls, train stations, where they kind of use the same thing for different purposes. The train station will bring the noise up when a train arrives or there's a big crowd. The mic will pick up there's a lot of ambient noise, and then the level will come up. Metro, because every train station in Victoria is a TOA setup, right? So it's a really good setup. Metro in the suburban stations also have a need that after 6 or 7 p.m. the volume has to stay down, because the houses nearby. So oftentimes they'll have a typical station has 4 platforms, two lines, platform either side of each line. What the system does after 7 p.m. or whatever time they set is it turns off the speakers on the outside platforms, because you just don't need it, because at night time the crowds are never that big unless it's footy, so unless there's big footy crowds, but they turn off those outside speakers so that the surrounding residents don't get the announcements as much. So they use ambient noise compensation for that. Shopping malls tend to use it for just making sure there's a decent level of music no matter how many people are in there, because the worst thing you can have in a retail environment is silence. Silence makes people stop buying stuff. So when we've got a lot of retail customers with a lot of TOA products, and when the amp goes down, they lose the music, it's panic stations. We've got to send out forward replacements because people hate silence. So yeah, they'll use noise compensation when there's a big crowd in there, the volume comes up, and then brings it back down when the crowds leave. But there's always background music going in that situation. And as I mentioned before, what level of control does everyone require? So it depends purely down to the customer whether they want to allow staff to adjust volumes and touch it, or some people just prefer nothing. All right, so outputs. What do you got to think about the outputs? What is the size of the venue? So the size of the venue obviously dictates how many speakers you need. We have a very, very basic rule of thumb of for ceiling speakers at 2.4 meters. If you don't know what you're going to need or what your budget is, we say one per 4 square meters. Now, oftentimes you don't need that many, but if they don't want to actually get us to measure it and design it for them, and they're just like, I just need speakers for this place, it's got to go in next week, send me some, how many should I use? We'll say, 1 per 4 square meters. Now, in a retail situation where it's young and funky, like a fashion shop, they'll often want more than that, and they want subs and stuff like that, because they want that vibe, right? It's with a decent amount of speakers. But for most retail like this and corporate and stuff like that, it's really just having a bit of background noise. So it doesn't have to be much, and the coverage doesn't have to be perfect the whole way across. Level of performance, as I mentioned. The main thing we consider here is the live music, and it's really, really important to dig in with the customer to say, okay, what kind of live music are you expecting? Is it just a DJ? Is it a band? Is it a duo? Oftentimes DJs will need more speakers than a band will, because DJs don't do anything, so they need the music to do all the work, because they literally stand there doing nothing. I'm a musician, right? So DJs, come on. You cut that one out, because I'm sure I'll get hunted down after saying that. A big consideration that a lot of people sort of skip over or just ignore, and it's a real bugbear of mine, is what's the environment like? I'm sure you've all been into a funky new cafe, glass windows, concrete floor, exposed ceiling, and they got one speaker in the corner just working its ass off, and the ambient noise from people talking, it just becomes an echo chamber. It's uncomfy. You can't hear the person you're sitting next to. When I go into that kind of situation, it just annoys me, because it's treatment. It's not hard to fix. I know you guys don't sell treatment, but putting some absorbent panels on some of the hard surfaces, and it doesn't need much. Even in a small cafe, you might only need 2 panels or 3 panels, but it instantly makes the venue better. A lot of times I've talked to people where they've been called into a restaurant or cafe to, the guy wants the sound fixed or improved or whatever and stuff like that. It's just like, pay for some treatment up front, and then all of a sudden everything gets better straight away, and then you put a new system in and it's 10 times better. So I really encourage people to ask that question, at least consider it, and tell the customer to consider it. A lot of customers will just say, no, I'm not paying for that, just put some speakers in and go away. And that,
the type of speaker help with that environment as well?
yeah, can do. Like, that's where we start, especially in cafes and Pendants are really good, because you can be more strategic with where you put them. So there's a really cool bar down in Rye, the St Andrews Beach, St Andrews Brewery down there, and they've converted an old horse stables, and they've got one of these. Each horse stable is a table, and you can book it out and blah blah blah. They've got 1 or 2 of these in each stable, right? So it's sitting probably lower than you'd have it, but it's sitting over the table, so it's probably sitting about there, maybe slightly higher, but it's really quite directional, and it means the people in there can get a good amount of sound without spilling too much into the next one, so you're not getting this sort of building wall of sound. So yeah, you can be more strategic about it. A lot of people aren't, but even putting up some blankets on the ceiling or something, hanging something like that, anything to sort of break up those reflections is a big deal. Indoors and outdoors combination, do they again want it split into zones? Are they wanting something different on the outdoors? Obviously with outdoor speakers, you got to make sure they're IP certified, weatherproof, waterproof. Are they going to have direct rain? Are they under an eave? We've got salt resistant speakers, for if it's a beach type situation, because that salt really gets into if they're not aluminium grills, then you'll see it by the beach, right? The grills start rusting and look awful, and you can't do anything with them. You've got to replace the grill, and oftentimes that means replacing the speaker. Ceiling mount speakers, surface mounts, so you're just choosing the right speaker for the environment. If they have exposed ceilings, pendants are usually the go, but sometimes they don't like the look of them, so that's where you use a surface mount speaker. Sometimes I think, Joe, we were looking at one where the guy wanted the speakers all on the walls, didn't he?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, and it's just like, well, you got to consider where people's heads are. It'd be cool to, like here, those work fine, but some people think the speakers can be down here. So anyone standing next to it and the volume goes up, they lose half their hearing. You know, so it's a challenge, but there's always a way around it. Subs, a lot of the bigger venues and a lot of the sort of more fashion orientated type stores want subs in the ceiling. Or you can, good thing with subs is you can put them under seats or under tables or anything, hide them. It's something to think about. And then, you start thinking about how many channels do we need, how many zones. Obviously it's an amplifier channel per zone. So you've got to think, do I need extension amps? Do I need multi instead of 2? Or, so you start adding it up. And should we use 100 volt or low impedance? So I'll go into this. I'm sure I'm sort of telling you guys what you know, but we'll just go over it again. So low impedance is generally for hi-fi, right? So, and we do put it into some of our retail customers, but I mean, realistically, you can have on a low impedance system a maximum of 4. If you've got an amp that can do 2 ohm outputs, you put 4 16 ohm speakers, you get down to 2 ohms. That's probably about the limit. Maybe more, I don't know. But you certainly can't do a building install with low impedance, right? But for certain spots, sometimes customers will have a mix, like for the boardroom, for instance, in a corporate, they might want low impedance in there because it's with their presentations and massive screen like this, they might like a more front of house kind of feel and a better frequency response. 100 volt, I'm sure you guys know what 100 volt. The main reason we use 100 volt is so we can have a heap of speakers up to 2.5 Ks run on a single wire. Easy to troubleshoot, easy to install, and the only trade-off is you lose some top end and some bottom end on the signal, generally. Which you can sort of EQ for a little bit, but not too much. And this is how you calculate it. You get your cable diameter, work out your impedance, and you can have up to about 2 Ks of cable depending on the load. Simple as that. And very, very, very simple. Add up your speaker wattages and make sure your amp's got 20% more power than the total required. The good thing with TOAs, especially with these A series TOAs, is they can run happily at 100% forever. And we've had customers where they just overloaded it and they still go. Right? So they're pretty hard wearing, these amps, and the power supplies in them can take a lot of abuse. I should dig up, I'll show you a photo later of one that came out of a cow shed recently and it's been replaced, and it is covered in every kind of substance you can imagine, and it was still working. It was incredible. So the main ones we use for small installations with multi-zone are the A series I was just talking about. The A2000 series has been around since the 90s, I think. Hasn't really changed much because it does the job and it works really well and people like them. A3500 series and A3600 series are the new ones. I've got one of them here. Just a bit of a modernisation in terms of network configuration and priority and ducking and a few other things as well. So an A2000 single zone installation is pretty straightforward. Paging mic, wireless mic, some kind of CD tuner or a Bluetooth device like that, and then speakers out. Very, very simple. You can put a control contact there for a mute as well. So some paging mics have a mute button which you can wire straight to that to mute the whole system if you want to. But yeah, very, very simple. The 3500, a bit more advanced. You have a few more inputs and you can select line or mic. We've got it here with two zones with an attenuator along the way. If you want to control the volume in the space, we have a lot in schools. We sell a lot of box speakers with the old volume knob with the attenuator on the side because teachers love to be able to adjust the volume in each classroom. It's the easiest way to do it. So this wireless mics, paging mics, handhelds, and then a fire system which you can set if it launches, it'll have priority over everything else. Then we get to the A3600. It's the most advanced of these range of amps. The main difference here is you can control it via the network. So you can actually build your own interface if you wanted to, iPad or computer, doesn't matter. It's got its own web server in there, so you just type in the IP address and away you go. Also with this, you can have input from a phone system, which again can override what's going on, and then the fire system can come in and have priority, and you've got zone control, and the zone control can take a relay switch from the fire system, and what it will do is mute all the other inputs and then put the amp at full volume. Doesn't matter what the volume is on the front, it'll do the alert and the evacuation at full volume. So pretty handy. So and then these have got some line outs and stuff as well, so you can go to extension amplifiers or go to different systems, like if it's incorporating with an existing paging system, or they've got existing amps or a digital system, you can interface with it. Then we get into the more multi-zone type applications with the VM series. So these VM series, they're kind of the next level up. They've got emergency buttons, evacuate, alert, and reset, so you can physically launch an alert. So schools like these, because the evacuate tone's now a pretty big deal with schools. You know, if they have someone untoward on the campus, they won't be able to have the ability to just press evacuate and away they go. This can also have a more advanced paging system, so you can page to all the zones or individual zones depending on your need. And these come in a 360 watt and a 240 watt, so you can run a decent amount of speakers off them. You've also got a fireman's comm here, so you can do a quick page directly from the amp. These can take 24 volt backup as well, so you start really getting into the more redundant systems. And they have a range of wall controls and extension amplifiers as well, so you can run up to, I think, 60 zones with these, and it's all interconnected via shielded twisted pair. So these systems can actually get pretty advanced for what you need, and it's definitely anything more than 2 zones you want to be looking at these, because they're easy to use. And then we have the 9000 series. So this is the one that goes into all the train stations across Victoria. There's the A9500. This is a mixer version. So we have a mixer version and then a version with a 2x500 watt power supply in it. This is a modular system. So you've got 8 slots in the back. So you can put up to 4 input cards and 4 output cards. You also, the reason Metro use it, it's got ambient noise control card that you can put in there as well. And you can get really advanced with the paging. You can do multiple zones between multiple amps and do all kinds of stuff. It also has DSP on board, so it's a full matrix system, so you can take any input to any output, but you can also process it as well. So you've got EQ, compressor, ducker, limiter, all that kind of stuff. It's all set up via a computer, by a programming interface, and I think it's still it's USB to RS-232, so it's still pretty old school. But yeah, you can have lots of options in here, lots of wall controls with, you can either do input selection, or you can do volume and input selection, or output selection, all kinds of things with them. So really good system, works really well, and we've sold a lot of them. And then the good old TOA power amps. The P series is a really good one to have with larger installations. It can take a line input, but it also can take a 100 volt input. So you can, if you've got a really wide ranging campus, for instance, this can go at the end of one of the speaker runs and take the 100 volt input signal, and then you've got 240 watts to run the next lot of speakers. And you just keep doing that until you run out of speakers or run out of amps. So really good system, and I think we've got a 480 watt version of that coming soon. And then the DA series, which is your more traditional multi-channel, I think it's up to 4x500 input and output with a volume on the front. Pretty straightforward stuff. So quick overview of the ceiling speakers. Obviously in the lower end without a back can, we've got the PC and CEM series. These are your cheap and cheerful kind of speakers. So if someone's wanting a heap of speakers and they only want to pay $30 each or something like that, that's the go-to. Then we jump up to the F series, which is a wide dispersion with a back can, so you get better bass response, tighter bass response really. And You can tap it from the front, so it's easy to install, and it's wide dispersion, so you can have a lot less speakers for the space you need, because I think it's 135 degrees dispersion, I think. We've got speaker data on all our speakers, including all the evac certified speakers. So all these speakers now are available and evac certified. So if you have any schools or government agencies who are looking for that kind of stuff, you can give us a yell. We've got about 30 models that are evac certified now. We can do speaker placement, we can do ease data, whatever you need. You know, if you've got a space, we'll map it up for you, so get the optimal way to do it. So, in doing ceiling speakers, it really is worth doing this. This is the most efficient way, and it will save you money. And then box speakers. Obviously, we've got the great BS1030 here, which we sell truckloads of. It's got a nice stainless steel thing, and it's got a handy little thing here. So, whichever way you want to mount it, you can twist the logo, so the logo is always up the right way, which is nice. But we sell heaps of those. We also got little subset systems for cafes, obviously the Pendants, column speakers and traditional Boss speakers, and we've got mini line arrays as well, which we sell a lot of the TOA mini line arrays, sort of 4 elements about that size, go into churches and schools, and they have weatherproof ones as well, so they go outside, and they sound great and they're a good price as well. Of course, the lovely old box speakers at every school in the country's probably got some of these somewhere, and with the volume knob, they love that. And then the good old horn speakers. We sell thousands and thousands of these every month. Obviously the standard old SC615s, you know, the typical kind of paging horn, larger flares, you know, for a bit more throw. Then we have the music horn. So we've got these in 2 versions, the sort of rectangle ones, the CS304s, and then we've got the CS64s, which you'll see at all the train stations around. We're more directional, but it's still a music horn, so you get a bit better response. So apart from the train stations, we sell lots of these to sports grounds, racing tracks, where they have, you know, a bit of music coming through as well as the paging announcement. So those have a much better response than the traditional horns, and they still work really well as well. So, and this is how they make them. So the TOA horns are still fashioned by hand. They tried it with machines, but they couldn't get the same kind of quality of the horn flare. So they just start off with blank discs like this, and then old mate here has a big steel pole and just runs it in, and that's your horns. Done like that. It does thousands. So the reason they have the horn factory in Indonesia is it's the biggest market in the world for horns. And it's all the minarets. We'll do the call to prayer each morning. They have at least 4, if not more, on each thing, and they want a horn because they want the call to prayer to go as far as humanly possible, as loud as you can. And it works. It works really well. So microphones, obviously we've got handhelds, paging and wireless, any kind of combination of both. We've got the wireless ones come in 2 frequencies, which between them, the F band works at 636 to 666, and the H band works at 578 to 606. Between the 2, they'll go anywhere in the country, but for most metro areas, either will work pretty fine. It's more the regional areas, NT and WA especially, where you can get caught out because a lot of TV frequencies over there are sitting on one band or the other. We have a frequency checker on our website. If you go to the Australis website, and it's called TOA frequencycheck.australismusic.com.au, rolls off the tongue. But you type in an address and it just shows you exactly what's going on in that area. So, or you call me and I tell you. Pretty simple. But it tells you straight away what's going to work, what's not going to work. And if the bands don't have ticks, that means there's TV frequencies in the area and you'll get into all kinds of trouble. So that's about it. So that's it. Any questions? All good? Pretty straightforward kind of stuff.
I just want to make a couple of points. Talking about TOA horns, if you've got a job that's really struggling with the low power answer, if you look at the TOA specs on their horns, they're always much higher output or rated dB output. So if we give them 1 watt in, a much higher output. We'll find them in 103 to 106 dB. You look at generally cheaper units, they're only talking about 98 dB. So in effect, you've doubled your power up on your output twice. So you can get far more out by just good matching of your speaker to have more than worrying about pushing out all the time sometimes. So sometimes the speaker doing the speaker better is an easy way of doing it.
It is the sensitivity as well. That's a good indicator. Cheap ones, the sensitivity will always be lower. You compare it to, you might have two about the same price, and if one's about 10 dB higher sensitivity, it's going to be significantly louder.
Every 3 dB, you're technically doubling your power of your amplifier. So if you've got 6 dB more out in your speaker, you've got a lot more freedom in your amp. So, but also, commercial market has really been the busiest part of our business, I reckon, since Christmas. I don't know if you guys agree, but I know what I'm ordering, and I'm ordering a lot more commercial than I may be. Probably maybe because I can't get AV anyway, but it's been a big growth. And governments are starting to the governments have been throwing a lot of money up for packages and incentive programs, for businesses, restaurants and things. I work with a sports organisation as a volunteer in the eastern area. All the facilities have been upgraded just recently. A lot of them have been upgraded, so they're starting to look at using some of those funds up. So some of those areas have been putting new PA systems in or whatever. So it's an area where we should be really able to capitalise on it.
And end of the day, if you have any questions or need help designing, just give us a yell, because this is all we do all day long. All we do is audio. Cool. All good? No. Thank you.
Oh, you should mention